You are standing by the walls of Babylon, a city where dreams sink into the mud and miracles exist only in the stories of tired people. Before you rise the Hanging Gardens, one of the wonders of the world, which no one has truly seen and which, perhaps, never even existed. Here, among dust, weary builders, and endless rumors, hope becomes just a joke, and history is a list of failures everyone prefers not to mention. Babylon builds its legends from disappointment, and you are their unwilling witness. Welcome to the city where every promise withers faster than the first green sprout, and where the greatest secret is the absence of any real wonder. But before you settle in, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now make yourself comfortable. We're getting started. You stand before the walls of Babylon, which people call eternal, although you know nothing in this place is eternal except the dust. You stare at the city's most famous entrance, the Ishtar Gate, but its famed blue is muted, almost apologetic, beneath the ever-present yellow haze. Some say the bricks were glazed with lapis lazuli, others with copper pigments, but you have never seen a lapis mine, and you have lived here all your life. Still, the gate looms, covered in reliefs of mythical animals whose blank eyes seem almost as bored as your own. The sun rises without ceremony. It is less a sunrise and more a kind of ceaseless brightening of the dust. At this hour, the guards at the gate are changing shifts. They do not march, they shuffle, cursing under their breath as their sandals fill with sand. You know these men. They are not heroes. They are tired, hungry, and already regretting their career choices, though in Babylon, a career is something that simply happens to you. In this city, you do not chase opportunity, you survive its whims. Each brick in the gate was laid with painstaking care, or so the official scribes claim. You know better. Bricklayers are paid by the hour, and time here is measured in how long you can go without coughing up a lungful of dust. It is said that the king himself, Nebuchadnezzar II, whose name is, frankly, longer than any of his projects, inspected the walls each morning. Perhaps he did, or perhaps he sent a steward with a good memory and an even better sense of which details could be left out in the report. On days like this, the city swells with travelers, traders, lost children, and goats with their own ideas about urban planning. The guards shout, but the goats, like the dust, ignore them. You watch a merchant argue with a tax collector at the gate, each insisting the other counts poorly. You wonder who will give up first: the merchant, who is late for the market, or the collector, who has already lost count of how many bribes he has accepted today. Behind the gate, you can hear the rumors, always the same, always slightly different. Today, the talk is of the Hanging Gardens, which no one has seen, but everyone claims to remember. They will be finished soon, says one builder. They are already finished, claims another, sweating under the weight of yesterday's promises. You look up at the battered archway, its lions and bulls chipped from decades of weather, and you wonder if the gardens will ever be more than words. Children run underfoot, chased by their mothers, who shout warnings about snakes and river thieves. You do not remember the last time you saw a river thief, but everyone swears they are real. It is a city built on stories, each one more improbable than the last. Still, the gate stands. Still, the walls rise. Somewhere behind you, a donkey brays. The sound echoes, reminding you that Babylon is never quiet, not even at dawn. The guards ignore it, focusing instead on the endless task of making themselves appear vigilant. One fiddles with a spear, bored, his gaze wandering to the horizon where the sun has failed to make anything look golden. You lean against the wall, feeling the uneven warmth of 1,000 bricks. Each was fired in kilns that belched smoke for weeks, watched by men who had long since given up on dreams of immortality. The city is eternal, they say, but you know that eternity in Babylon is just a word scribbled by tired hands onto wet clay tablets that will crumble the moment the rains come. Someone once claimed the gates were built to keep enemies out. You suspect they were built to keep the dust in. Either way, here you stand at the threshold between history and legend, watching as Babylon's day begins again, as always, with the slow trudge of feet and the endless murmur of half remembered glories. You squint at the chipped blue glaze and wonder if paradise is really being built inside these walls. Why does it smell so much like mud? You step away from the gate, and the dust clings to your feet with an intimacy you never invited. Here in Babylon, dust is a silent, persistent companion. It is in your sandals, your hair, your throat, and the space beneath your fingernails. It drifts through the air in lazy spirals, finding every crevice, settling on every surface. The market stalls are dusted with it before the sun has climbed even halfway up the sky, and the artisans who sell their wares have long since abandoned any hope of keeping their pottery clean. There's a joke the merchants tell. If you ever want to measure the wealth of Babylon, count the handfuls of dust. No one laughs, because it is not really a joke, it is a way of life. The city's riches are hidden beneath a film of silt that grows thicker with every passing week. You watch as a group of children try to draw pictures in it with sticks, only to have the wind erase their efforts with an indifferent gust. You breathe in, and the air is heavy, flavored with a mix of mud, smoke from the brick kilns, and something metallic that always lingers after the river has flooded. The elders say that the dust is a blessing, for it reminds everyone that no matter how grand the city becomes, it will always rest upon the same clay foundation. They do not mention that the blessing comes with a cough and a nose that never truly stops running. From the edge of the avenue, you watch as workers haul baskets of wet earth from the riverbank, their skin caked with mud, their faces set in a kind of grim resignation. Babylon's foundations are the color of old bread, a sullen brown that never quite dries, even in the hottest months. You remember once asking why no one tries to sweep the streets. The old woman selling onions at the corner looked at you as if you had asked why the sun does not sleep at night. There are men whose entire job is to patch the roads each week, scooping mud from one place only to dump it in another. They work methodically, muttering about the futility of it all, but they do it anyway, because work is work, and there are always more roads, more cracks, more dust. Occasionally, a new overseer will arrive, brimming with ambition and armed with plans for better drainage. Within a month, he is gone, and the mud remains, unimpressed by his efforts. You pass a row of houses, each one coated in the same powdery film. Some families try to keep the worst of it out by hanging damp cloths over their doorways. It works, but only for a day. In the morning, the cloth is stiff, the color of old parchment, and the dust is waiting patiently on the threshold. Every so often, you hear a neighbor boasting about a new broom made from imported reeds. You watch as he sweeps with determination, his shoulders squared, his face hopeful. By sunset, the broom is broken, and the dust is thicker than before, as if mocking his optimism. Inside the city, every surface tells the story of slow defeat. Statues of kings and gods stand grim faced, their stone cloaks covered in a gray brown layer. Scribes try to keep their tablets clean, but the wet clay sticks to their fingers, and the dust finds its way into the grooves of every inscription. You have seen a priest lose his temper during a ceremony because the sacred altar was, yet again, covered in an inch of grime. The gods, you suspect, are used to disappointment. Once, a traveler from the West stopped you and asked why the people here did not simply pave the streets with stone. You almost laughed. Almost. There is no stone in Babylon, or at least not enough to cover even the king's own courtyard. The city is built on mud, out of mud, for mud. The finest houses are made of bricks, fired hard and stacked high, but even these are not immune. The dust seeps between them, patient and unhurried, the city's oldest resident. You pause to brush off your tunic, only to realize that you are accomplishing nothing. A passing boy, his face streaked with dirt, grins at you. If you want to stay clean, he says, you must leave Babylon. You nod, knowing he is right, but you will not leave. No one really leaves, not for long. The city pulls you back with its noise, its crowds, its dreams, and its endless dust. Some days you envy the river. The Euphrates moves restlessly past the city, carrying mud and silt downstream, away to places where Babylon's reach does not extend. But even the river cannot escape entirely. Its waters flood the fields and then recede, leaving behind new layers of earth that quickly dry and join the city's endless supply. You walk on, the soles of your feet making soft, dull prints that vanish within minutes. The wind shifts, carrying a cloud of dust across the rooftops, settling once more on everything you see. The sun climbs higher, and you squint at its brightness, which reflects off the powdery ground in a glare that forces you to look away. Babylon's dust is not just a nuisance, it is a memory, a warning, a promise that nothing built here will last forever. You find comfort in that thought, strange as it is. You are part of the city, and the city is part of you. In the end, when all the gardens are gone and the walls have crumbled, there will still be dust, and it will remember every careless step, every vanished name, every dream half buried and forgotten beneath its patient, unyielding weight. You have learned over the years that in Babylon, the rivers are not simply water, they are a presence, a mood, a kind of untamable spirit that quietly laughs at the ambitions of mortals. The great Euphrates, which cuts through the city's heart, has many faces, sometimes lazy, sometimes angry, sometimes sly. You stand on the crumbling embankment and listen to its slow mutter, as if the water itself were gossiping about everything it has witnessed. Here, at the city's edge, the line between river and street is always blurred. You can never be certain where the mud ends and the water begins. It is the rivers that made Babylon possible, so the elders say. Without water, there is only dust. You nod along because this is one of the few truths nobody bothers to argue. Still, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and you see it every season when the waters rise and flood the city's lower quarters. Children splash where streets used to be, and vendors try to float their wares in clay bowls, calling out half heartedly to anyone still willing to haggle for onions in a foot of brackish water. On days when the water recedes, you see the marshes revealed, a slick, shining wasteland between the outer wall and the horizon. Reeds grow in uneven patches, sharp edged and stubborn, home to birds whose calls are harsh and indifferent. Frogs croak in the darkness, and some nights, when the moon is bright and you cannot sleep, you wonder if there are more frogs in Babylon than people. The marshes breed mosquitoes in biblical numbers, and in every household invents a new charm or amulet to drive them away. None of them work. The king's engineers, poor hopeless men who were born with clean hands and now have none, spend their lives sketching endless maps of canals and ditches. Their work is never finished because the river changes its mind every month. One week, a canal is a triumph, water flowing where it ought. The next, it is a stagnant ditch where oxen go to die and children lose their sandals forever. Still, the engineers persist, their dreams smothered in blueprints and mud. You walk the city's edge, where the water and land compete for ownership. There are fishermen here, men with quiet voices and wide, knowing eyes. They say the river gives and the river takes, and if you listen closely, you will hear it plotting. Some days you think they are right. The river has swallowed more than a few bridges, and, on at least one memorable occasion, the grand tent of a visiting ambassador from the north. He left the next day, vowing never to return, and no one blamed him. The river is not only a threat, but also a lifeline. Every bucket hauled up from the bank is a small act of faith. Gardeners rely on its generosity, priests bless it, Mothers curse it. Children play in it until they catch fever. In the dry months, the water turns thick and slow, the color of old bronze. Fights break out at the wells, and rumors about who controls the best water are passed in anxious whispers. The palace always has enough, of course. You have never seen the king go thirsty, nor his camels. The rest must make do. You remember the first time you saw a water wheel, a creaking, awkward contraption, all wood and rope and nervous laborers. This will make Babylon bloom, someone said. But the wheel broke within a week. Now the broken frame stands as a warning near the riverbank, a reminder that cleverness has its limits. Yet every season, someone else tries to improve the water lifting devices, and every season, the river finds a new way to mock them. Beyond the city walls, the landscape is a patchwork of mud and water, sometimes indistinguishable from one another. There are rumors of monsters in the deep pools and treasures in the silt, and if you ask 10 fishermen, you will hear 10 different tales. You have never seen a monster, but you have seen more than one man disappear, his last words lost in the thick, buzzing silence of the reeds. When the sun sets, the marshes glow with a sickly, greenish light, as if the land itself is uncertain whether it wants to become earth or water. The frogs grow louder, and even the bravest children hurry home. In these moments, you cannot help but wonder if the city will someday slip quietly into the marsh, pulled apart by the very waters that feed it. The priests, naturally, claim the gods control the river, that each flood or drought is a message to the people. The practical men of Babylon know better. The river does what it wants, no matter how many sacrifices are made on its banks. Still, each year at the festival of Ishtar, the priests gather at the water's edge, their voices echoing across the marsh, promising abundance. You watch from the crowd and try not to laugh. At dawn, you return to the embankment and find the water rising once again. The city's dreams, like the gardens themselves, are always in danger of being drowned by the restless mood of the river. You watch as a small group of builders argues about the best way to divert a new stream, their voices swallowed by the wind. Behind them, reeds bow and rise again, indifferent. The marsh, the river, the dust, they will all outlast you. But for now, you stand on the bank and listen as the water tells its stories, knowing they are older, sadder, and truer than anything written in clay. You have always believed there are only two kinds of crowds in Babylon: those that are dangerous and those that are only slightly less so. Today, as you squeeze yourself between a cart loaded with half-rotten figs and a group of temple guards whose armor is more decoration than defense, you realize this is one of the latter. The morning market has begun. You do not remember a time when there was not a market. Perhaps there never was such a time, only days when the city was quieter or you were less awake. There is a logic to the crowd, a kind of swirling, grinding current that takes hold of your feet and your patience and pulls you along whether you will it or not. Merchants shout in languages you barely recognize, offering pottery, onions, dates, and strange fruits that look like swollen tongues. Some of them wear imported linen, bright and proud, but most wear the city's true uniform, clothes that are brown from dust, sweat, and the ambition of 100 failed business schemes. You pass a stall where a man with a face like weathered wood waves at you with one hand and clutches a wriggling chicken with the other. He offers a price that would make the king himself blush, and when you decline, he looks almost disappointed, as if he had been hoping for an argument to break the monotony. Behind him, a pair of children bicker over a pile of broken toys. One offers a doll missing both arms, the other, a wooden horse with 3 legs. Both swear theirs is the better bargain. It is hard not to notice the slaves, but easy to pretend not to see them. Their owners bark orders in shrill, practiced tones, and the slaves themselves keep their eyes down, shuffling forward, shoulders hunched. Some are branded, some are not, but all are coated in the same dust as you. You catch snatches of conversation. One slave quietly jokes with another about escaping into the marshes, and both laugh, as if they know what a bad idea that would be. Even the marsh would spit them back out eventually. Here, in the market's center, the noise grows like a living thing. A fishmonger yells about the freshness of his catch, though you can smell from halfway down the avenue that his fish are anything but fresh. A woman with too many gold bangles sells clay figurines of the gods, swearing they bring luck, but you notice even she does not keep one for herself. A man hawks water in cracked jars, and nobody asks where he got it, because in Babylon, water is water, no matter how muddy. Every now and then, a tax collector drifts through the crowd, eyes sharp for unpaid debts, and hands quick to disappear coins. You watch as he tries to count the figs on a stall, loses his place, and gives up. You almost feel sorry for him until you remember the time he tried to fine you for standing in a suspicious manner near the city wall. He moves on, muttering about paperwork, his sandals sticking slightly in the mud. You find yourself near a group of bricklayers, still in their work tunics, complaining loudly about their pay and the madness of the king's newest project. Another tower, one says, rolling his eyes, as if we do not have enough falling down already. The others laugh, and you think they sound tired rather than amused. Their hands are broad and cracked, their fingernails rimmed with dried clay. Their laughter dies quickly, replaced by a familiar silence, the silence of men who know the city only needs them when things are falling apart. A group of foreign traders has set up a makeshift stall under a faded awning. They speak in quick, clipped syllables, and you see Babylonian coins change hands for glass beads, dyed cloth, and some small, glittering stones that might be precious or might be colored glass. Nobody asks too many questions. In Babylon, curiosity is a luxury, and people prefer their mysteries in manageable portions. You step aside to let a herd of goats pass, each animal with the same resigned expression as their shepherd. The goats are cleaner than most children you see. One pauses to nibble on a strand of your tunic. The shepherd shrugs as if to say, "It could be worse." You suspect he is right. The air is thick, pressed down by the heat. The smells of sweat, onions, cheap wine, and the ever present undertone of mud. Somewhere, a street musician plays a flute off key, and nobody throws him coins. His song is as aimless as the crowd, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, never truly arriving anywhere. You pass a group of old women haggling over a basket of dates. The oldest one wags her finger at the merchant, accusing him of cheating her family for 3 generations. He insists she is thinking of someone else. She does not believe him, and neither does anyone else. Still, the deal is made, and both sides grumble loudly about their bad luck. In the shade of a crumbling wall, a slave sits with his back pressed against sun warmed bricks, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Or perhaps it is just exhaustion. His master stands nearby, lost in conversation about the price of imported wine, ignoring the way his own feet are sinking into the mud. You push on, trying not to step on any toes or incur the wrath of any merchants. The market is always the same: chaos and boredom, hope and resignation, all jostling for space. You wonder how many people in this crowd actually want to be here, and you suspect the answer is none. But there is nowhere else to go, and so the city gathers itself every morning and plays the old game again. Above the din, you hear a new rumor. The king is planning another festival, another grand display, perhaps even a parade through the unfinished gardens. The merchants scoff, the slaves groan, and you simply shake your head. You have heard it all before. You keep walking, swept along by the crowd, knowing that in Babylon you are never truly alone, only temporarily less crowded. You do not see the king, not really. No one does, except on those rare festival days when he stands above the crowds, draped in gold and blue, pretending to enjoy the sound of 1,000 trumpets. But Nebuchadnezzar the Second is everywhere, a name on every wall, a signature stamped in the mud of every new building, a shadow in every conversation about taxes or construction. In Babylon, ambition is always described in the future tense, and the king is the future, or at least the endless promise of one. You hear the rumors even in the muddiest corners of the city. The king is building again, something grand, something the world will remember. The Hanging Gardens, they call it, though nobody agrees on what exactly it will be. Some say it will be a mountain of flowers so high you could see it from the farthest fields. Others imagine terraces bursting with vines, waterfalls trickling down in sheets of silver. A few cynics, and there are many in Babylon, say it will be nothing more than another unfinished palace, a pile of bricks melting slowly back into the riverbank. The story that everyone prefers, because it is the saddest and most beautiful, is that Nebuchadnezzar builds for love. They say his queen, Amethyst, came from the cold green hills of the north and found the city unbearable, flat, hot, colorless, weighed down by the same gray dust as everything else. To please her, The king promised a miracle, gardens that would rival the mountains, cool and lush, suspended above the mud. It is a nice story, and in Babylon, nice stories are always improved with each retelling. Each time you hear it, the queen grows lonelier, the gardens more impossible. In the taverns and markets, the king is a source of endless commentary. Some claim he spends all day at his palace table, surrounded by plans and arguments, brow furrowed, eyes narrow, refusing to eat until every arch is drawn straight. Others imagine him wandering the half built terraces at night, brooding over shadows, counting the plants that refuse to bloom. Once you hear a merchant swear that Nebuchadnezzar himself visited his stall to ask about the price of onions for the royal kitchens. You do not believe this, but you admire the effort. The king's scribes, who are paid by the line, write endlessly about his vision. They use words like eternal, unprecedented, and divinely inspired. Sometimes they slip and use expensive, though only when the overseers are not listening. Scribes in Babylon are like the dust, everywhere, settling in the cracks, impossible to avoid. They say the gardens will be a wonder of the world. You are beginning to suspect that wonder in Babylonian simply means unfinished project with a generous budget. Behind the palace walls, the work never stops. You hear the clatter of bricks, the drone of overseers, the endless parade of oxen hauling water and soil. The king's engineers, the same men who have spent years arguing with the river, now argue with gravity, sketching impossible solutions on broken tablets. Each morning, new workers arrive, blinking in the harsh light, not knowing whether their job is to carry water, lift bricks, or simply stand and look busy when an official walks by. Somewhere, Amytis waits, or so the story goes. People say she walks the palace corridors, eyes fixed on a horizon she cannot see, hands restless, longing for green. Some days, the king is said to visit her, promising that the next layer of bricks will be the one to bring her joy. Other days, the queen is simply a name, repeated by those who need a reason for all this building and noise. You wonder, as you listen to the latest news, whether the king's ambition is truly for love or simply for legacy. In Babylon, love is a good excuse, but legacy is the real prize. You have seen other kings come and go, their monuments eroded by the river, their names forgotten by everyone except a few bored priests. Nebuchadnezzar, everyone says, will be different. He will be remembered. His gardens will never fade. But you are not so sure. Even now, the first terraces are already covered with a film of dust, the water channels clogging with mud. Workers curse the slippery steps and the endless hauling of soil from distant fields. The palace architects, men with soft hands and sharp tongues, argue about whether the new arches will hold under their own weight. You overhear a guard muttering that the foundations are already sinking, that the gardens will collapse before the queen has ever set foot on them. No one blames the king for trying. Ambition is the only thing that grows easily in Babylon. But you sense the city's patience is wearing thin. Each new project brings promises, jobs, glory, an escape from the dust and the marsh. But behind each promise, there is the slow, steady grind of labor, the endless lifting, digging, mixing, and waiting for someone else to declare it finished. At night, the city quiets, and you hear the distant sounds of hammers and voices echoing from the palace compound. Perhaps Nebuchadnezzar cannot sleep, haunted by visions of hanging vines and cool shade, the promise of a paradise that will outlast the city's endless mud. Or perhaps he simply cannot stop building, because to stop is to admit that the dust and the river are stronger than any king. You stand at the edge of a square where a new shipment of bricks is being stacked, and you imagine the king's face, stern, unsmiling, intent on victory. He may never walk here, but every stone is laid in his name, every ope of beauty weighed against the certainty of decay. In Babylon, ambition always stands taller than the walls, and the higher it rises, the more the dust seems to settle. You might think a wonder of the world would be built on something solid. In Babylon, you would be wrong. Here, everything that looks like stone is, upon closer inspection, just hardened clay, glorious, crumbly, moody clay. The city sits on a giant riverbank, and its buildings are made of what the river coughs up: mud, silt, and the occasional fossilized wishbone. Real stone is as rare as a satisfied worker. The only things harder to find are a straight wall and a plan that lasts longer than a single rainstorm. The hanging gardens, like everything else in Babylon, begin with mud. The architects, their robes always suspiciously clean, draw grand sketches of terraces rising into the sky. They nod wisely at slates and wave their hands as if conjuring walls from thin air. But it is not air they have, only dirt and water, and the hope that no one will notice when things start to sag. Every morning, a new batch of laborers hauls fresh clay from the river's edge, mixing it with straw and sweat, their hands turning the same color as the ground beneath their feet. You watch a line of men lugging bricks, each one stamped with the king's name, as if that could protect them from the inevitable. The bricks are fired in smoky kilns that belch gray clouds over the city, giving the sun a taste of Babylonian hospitality. The older workers complain the new bricks are thinner, more brittle, a sign the city is growing faster than it should. You have seen them crumble at the corners, especially after the first good rain. Stack them high, the overseer says. The gods will take care of the rest. You suspect the gods are amused by this confidence. Stones, real, heavy, foreign stones, arrive only for the most important parts: the king's throne room, the city's main gates, and a single shrine that no one is allowed to touch. These blocks come by barge from places with real mountains, carved by men who speak different tongues and work for double pay. They are dropped into place with a chorus of curses and cheers, while the local builders look on with a mixture of awe and envy. But there are never enough stones. For the gardens, there will be clay, always more clay. The engineers, who once dreamed of palaces that would outlast the city, now specialize in improvisation. Every day brings a new problem. The clay walls bulge, the terraces leak, the archways develop cracks big enough for a child to slip through. Solutions are found, discarded, and rediscovered with a different name. It is a new technique, an architect tells you proudly, as he orders yet another row of bricks torn down and rebuilt at a slightly different angle. You do not ask how new it really is. Every terrace of the gardens must be strong enough to hold tons of soil and water, but also flexible enough to move when the earth beneath shifts or the river floods again. The result is a structure that groans under its own weight, held together by optimism and an ever changing assortment of ropes, wooden beams, and prayers. You watch as a group of workers tries to seal a leaky channel with bitumen, a sticky black goo from the wells far to the east. They smear it everywhere, cursing the heat and the smell until the channel finally holds, at least until the next season. No one really trusts the plans. The king's chief engineer, a gaunt man with eyes like old coins, keeps 3 sets of drawings in his satchel: the official one, a practical one, and the version he suspects will actually be built. He changes them daily, often in the middle of a conversation. Adaptability, he says, is the heart of Babylonian engineering. You wonder if that is true, or simply the kind of thing men say when their feet are always sinking. The river, meanwhile, keeps watch, never impressed. Its floods wash away carefully laid foundations. Its banks shift and crack, swallowing the work of 100 hands in a single muddy gulp. You once saw a wall vanish overnight, replaced by a pool of sluggish water and a scattering of bricks like broken teeth. The next morning, the laborers arrived and started over, as if the previous day's work had been a rumor, not reality. No one complained. They knew the rules. When rain comes, it is an event. The streets turn to soup, the brickwork sweats brown, and every unfinished wall becomes a lesson in humility. The engineers hurry to cover their projects with tarps, but the wind laughs at tarps, and the rain finds every gap. It seeps into joints, swells the clay, and leaves behind a mess that looks suspiciously like what they started with. The only thing that grows faster than the gardens is the list of things to repair. Despite it all, work continues. Overseers shout from the half-built terraces, their voices thin and hoarse from a lifetime of disappointment. Workers slog through puddles, each carrying more mud home than they brought to the site. In the evenings, the city's bakers use the same clay ovens to bake bread and fire bricks. The smells of wheat and wet earth mingling in the narrow alleys. Sometimes you wonder if anyone can taste the difference. Every so often, someone claims to have invented a new kind of brick, one that will not crack or sag. The king's advisors rush to test it, pouring water over the samples, weighing them with stones. They always fail. Babylon is a city built on optimism, but it is optimism that knows when to duck. When the sun goes down, the river whispers to the clay, and the clay listens, already dreaming of the day it will return to mud. You step over a pile of broken bricks, their kingly seals already fading. Somewhere nearby, a young apprentice tries to sketch the gardens as they might look when finished, an impossible tangle of arches and greenery. He looks up, covered in dust, and asks, "Will it last?" You shrug. In Babylon, even the question is older than the city itself. You are not afraid of heights, or so you tell yourself, but in Babylon, the very idea of a staircase inspires a certain kind of dread. The hanging gardens promise wonders, cool shade, green terraces, trickling water, but first you must get there. The architects have designed stairways, ramps, and ladders in numbers that would make a mountain goat hesitate. Their plans, if stacked atop one another, might actually reach the heavens. In reality, these stairways are less a route to paradise than an obstacle course for the desperate and the doomed. Each day, as you pass the construction site, you watch new staircases rising from the mud. Some are wide and shallow, fit for a parade of royal guests. Others are narrow, almost vertical, so steep you can hear even the bravest worker curse under his breath as he ascends, clutching bricks or sacks of soil to his chest. Some stairs spiral endlessly, leading to nowhere at all, a platform abandoned when someone realized the structure beneath could not support the weight. The laborers are not fooled by talk of glory. They climb because the overseers shout and because coins are coins, even when paid late and counted twice. The king, it is rumored, once insisted that every terrace must be reachable without shame or inconvenience. What he received instead were stairways that wobble in the sun and creak with every step, their clay surfaces polished smooth by 1,000 terrified feet. Sometimes, in the stillness of the early morning, you can hear the sound of someone slipping, a brief, desperate skitter, followed by muttered prayers or the dull thump of failure. No one who can avoid the stairs actually uses them. The queen, if she exists at all, is carried by a retinue of servants, her litter balanced carefully to avoid the most treacherous sections. The architects float along, heads held high, rarely risking their own shins. The guards, whose duty it is to patrol every level, trade the job among themselves, claiming sudden illnesses or urgent business elsewhere. The bravest or the most foolish young men race up the flights on dares, their pride usually left behind somewhere between the third and fourth landing. Some stairways are built, torn down, and rebuilt within the same month. Others linger, unfinished and unloved, sprouting weeds and rumors in equal measure. You once saw a staircase that ended in open air, the intended platform having collapsed in a midnight rainstorm. The next day, a row of palm trunks was lashed to its side, forming a temporary bridge that swayed in the wind, terrifying everyone except the goats, who seemed to regard it as an improvement. At the top of every staircase, there is always someone waiting, a foreman with a tally stick, a bricklayer with arms like tree trunks, a boy delivering water skins for a few coins. They glance down the endless flights, dreaming perhaps of easier work in another city, a city with fewer stairs and more patience. The view from the top, people say, is magnificent. A river winding through fields, the city spread out like a faded map, the marshes glinting in the distance. But no one ever seems to linger. After a moment, they turn and descend, faces set, backs stiff, eager to escape the breeze that always threatens to send them tumbling down. There are stories, of course, as there always are in Babylon. One tells of a builder who climbed every flight of stairs in the gardens in a single day, counting each step aloud. By sunset, he had lost track, his legs trembling, his mind wandering into strange calculations about the distance between heaven and earth. Another tale, whispered by night watchmen, claims that the stairs themselves shift when no one is looking, twisting and settling, eager to remind everyone that the only thing more dangerous than climbing is believing you have finally reached the top. Sometimes, the stairways serve as makeshift meeting places for those with nowhere else to go. Lovers sneak up after dark, hoping for privacy, but finding only stray cats and the faint smell of bitumen. Workers huddle on the landings, sharing bread and gossip, their voices echoing off the mud brick walls. Children dare each other to climb higher, to touch the very edge of the highest terrace, and then run shrieking back down, certain the spirits of the stairs are following close behind. The king's inspectors arrive from time to time, their sandals spotless, their faces set in lines of practiced disappointment. They measure, argue, and scribble notes, but the stairs remain much as they are, crooked, worn, perpetually unfinished. We will fix it tomorrow, says one architect, when the next shipment of bricks arrives. But tomorrow is a concept that means little in Babylon, where today's stairways are tomorrow's ruins. At night, when the city grows quiet and the river's song is the only sound, you can see the stairways silhouetted against the stars. They rise and fall, intersect and wander, leading the eye upward to a place that never quite arrives. You wonder if this was the king's intention, a paradise always just out of reach, promised in every dream, but never truly built. In the end, the stairways belong to the city, not to the dreamers who imagined them or the hands that shaped them. They climb because Babylon climbs, restless and unfinished, a city always reaching upward, even as the dust and water pull it back down. And you, standing at the base of another flight, staring at the worn steps and the shadows above, decide once again to take the long way around. You have never met a Babylonian who truly loves water. They may sing its praises in hymns, offer it to gods in clay bowls, and carve canals until their hands bleed, but in their hearts, water is more curse than blessing. You walk past the newest wonder, the great irrigation system designed to bring paradise to the king's gardens, and you see only the faces of tired workers, arms flecked with mud, hair stiff with lime, eyes narrowed against the constant drizzle of leaks. The gardens themselves demand more water than the city can ever spare. Each terrace, heavy with imported soil, thirsty roots, and the optimism of 100 planners, drinks greedily. The water must be raised from the river below, lifted bucket by bucket, wheel by wheel, a slow torture for oxen, men, and the unlucky slaves who drew the shortest straw. There are machines now, wooden screws, shade-offs, water wheels of ingenious but untrustworthy design. They rattle and groan in the morning heat, their gears already sticky with silt and regret. Every system has a master, or at least someone whose job it is to look responsible. You see them at dawn, pacing the length of a half-built aqueduct, poking at clay pipes with thin sticks, calling for more bitumen and less incompetence. They issue orders in a monotone that could put a river to sleep, always threatening to fire someone, never actually doing it. The workers listen, or pretend to listen, because the system is fickle, and in every morning is a gamble. Will the water flow or not? Will today be the day the pipes collapse, or the day the overflow drowns an entire terrace? You are invited to inspect the miracle of the upper terraces, a network of channels that split, twist, and reunite with the enthusiasm of drunken snakes. The engineers beam with pride, explaining how gravity and clever angles will ensure even distribution. You notice that at least 3 channels are already blocked by leaves, and a fourth is leaking a slow, sullen stream down the outer wall. Easily fixed, says the chief planner, waving away your concerns. In Babylon, nothing is ever easily fixed, but optimism is almost as abundant as mud. When the system works, the gardens come alive. Water glimmers along the narrow rills, trickling into basins where lilies float and reeds sway. Vines uncurl, thirsty roots gorging on the first true rain in weeks. You watch workers rush to plug holes with wads of rags, hands, or, when desperation strikes, someone's tunic. The moment is fleeting. Within an hour, the water has found a new weakness. A patch of wall darkens, clay oozing under the strain, and someone begins to shout about imminent collapse. The water brings life, but it also brings misery. The bricks, made with the finest local clay and no small amount of hope, dissolve under the constant assault. Bitumen, applied in thick, tarry smears, stinks in the sun, but still the leaks grow. The terraces warp and sag, edges drooping like the faces of overworked laborers. Mold appears in streaks, slimy and persistent, a reminder that paradise and rot are never far apart. You hear whispers of a new plan, imported stone, copper pipes, magical linings from distant lands, but the city's coffers are already half empty, and the king's patience is even thinner. Below the gardens, the river itself grows sullen. Buckets come up muddy, and the banks are scarred from so many water haulers. The oxen balk at the climb, hooves slipping on slick planks, their eyes rolling in silent protest. The foremen curse, the laborers grumble, and someone always remembers, too late, to bring a rope for the buckets. When the water reaches the top, It is warm, heavy with silt, and half evaporated by the sun. Occasionally, the system works too well. One morning, after a rare night of heavy rain, you find the lower terraces drowning beneath an accidental waterfall. Workers stagger about in knee deep mud, frantically diverting streams with makeshift barriers, bricks, broken pots, lengths of reed mat. A child's toy floats by, a clay horse setting off for adventure. The foreman, face streaked with rain and panic, orders the emergency plan, which consists mostly of shouting louder and blaming yesterday's shift. It is said the king himself once came to view the irrigation miracle. He was shown a carefully prepared section where everything sparkled, clear channels, thriving greenery, the hum of a dozen happy bees. As soon as he left, a pipe burst and washed the scene away, leaving a muddy ruin and three engineers swearing eternal secrecy. You do not know if the king believes his gardens are truly watered by skill or by luck. Perhaps he understands that in Babylon, luck is the more reliable of the two. The city's ordinary people, those who will never set foot on a terrace, are unimpressed. They watch the endless parade of buckets and pipes and mutter that water is wasted on things that cannot be eaten. Housewives bicker with water sellers over muddy jars, and children are sent to the river with amphorae that always come back heavier than the children themselves. The priests pray for rain, then complain when it comes all at once. You stand beneath the shadow of a dripping wall, water running down your back in a cold trickle, and think of all the things that water destroys: bricks, dreams, reputations, shoes. In the alleys below, you can already hear the telltale slap of someone slipping in the new mud, followed by the usual curses. The hanging gardens, you realize, are less a miracle of engineering than a monument to stubbornness, an elaborate reminder that in Babylon, water is not life, but an endless test of patience. As the sun sets and the shadows grow long, the garden's hidden pipes gurgle, the bricks drip, and somewhere, out of sight, another leak begins to form. You shake your head, step around the growing puddle, and wonder which will give out first: the gardens, the workers, or the river itself. You have heard people describe the walls of Babylon as mighty, imposing, eternal. You walk past them every day, their great faces rising from the muddy streets like the sides of a box built to hold the city's confusion. But up close, the walls seem less like monuments and more like stubborn reminders that nothing in Babylon can stay clean or still for long. Each brick is a story, and most of those stories involve something creeping, climbing, or clinging for dear life. From a distance, the outer walls shimmer with color, but it is a trick of the sun and the fine, powdery dust that settles on everything. Step closer, and you see the true population of Babylon: lizards sunning themselves on the warm clay, spiders spinning their webs in the cracks, ants marching in lines as precise as any royal procession. Moss grows where the shadow lingers, finding nourishment in every dripping leak and every bit of lost hope. Ivy, imported for the gardens, but indifferent to royal boundaries, has found its way into the seams and corners, rooting itself where mortar fails. Every wall is a ladder for someone. Early in the morning, before the heat can chase them away, children scale the lowest terraces, their bare feet slapping softly on sun baked bricks. They search for birds' nests and lost coins, daring each other to climb higher, to touch the edge of forbidden places. Once, you watched a girl disappear over the top of a crumbling parapet, her laughter echoing down into the market square. She returned an hour later with a broken sandal and a handful of stolen dates, neither of which lasted the day. The garden walls, so new they still smell of wet clay and bitumen, already bear the marks of life's insistence. Vines planted with hope and ceremony dangle from the edges, their tendrils exploring every surface, searching for a foothold, a weakness, a way in. Not all the green belongs to gardeners. There are weeds from the riverbanks, seeds blown in on the wind, volunteers thriving where nothing else will. You spot tiny flowers, yellow and white, growing from a crack where yesterday there was only dust. Where the gardeners cannot reach, nature does its own work. Mold creeps in at the damp corners, tracing silent, dark lines across the plaster. It is the first to arrive after every rain, the last to leave when the sun returns. Workmen slap at it with rags, smear on more bitumen, and then step back, knowing it will win in the end. Every conversation about permanent solutions ends with someone shrugging, someone cursing, and a silent agreement not to tell the king. Even animals understand the city's walls better than the men who built them. Pigeons strut along the parapets, leaving behind the white reminders of their passing. Cats, always more clever than their owners, discover holes that lead straight into the heart of the palace, vanishing for days and returning with the air of creatures who have seen things mortals never will. You once watched a monkey, escaped from a merchant's traveling show, climb the outer wall and disappear into the gardens. The search for it lasted a week. The monkey was never found, but the gardens gained several new scarecrows, as if anyone believed a Babylonian crow could be frightened by anything. Somewhere along the wall, an old mural tells stories of the city's founding, heroes with impossible shoulders, gods larger than life, walls untouched by time. The paint is flaking, the faces lost to the sun and the weather, but the mural is still a favorite target for children with sticks and a talent for mischief. Every so often, a fresh attempt is made to restore it, new colors painted over old lies, but nothing ever quite matches the original. The wall is too alive, too restless to be a canvas for anything permanent. At night, you can hear the walls moving. It is not your imagination. The bricks settle, the mortar shifts, water trickles down hidden channels. Somewhere a vine pulls loose, a clump of moss tumbles to the ground. Sometimes a section gives way altogether, the sound swallowed by the city's dreams. In the morning, the damage is quietly repaired, The evidence swept into a pile and carted away before the king's overseers arrive. The guards who patrol the tops of the walls are more interested in the life below than in distant threats. They keep watch over the city's rooftops, calling warnings to children, chasing stray dogs away from food stalls, throwing stones at crows that refuse to leave. They know the walls as only those who have walked them 1,000 times can. Every loose brick, every secret passage, every spot where the mortar has gone soft and the wind whistles through. When trouble comes, they run not to the gates, but to the places where the walls are thinnest, weakest, most likely to give way under pressure. You pause at the base of a terrace and watch a line of ants struggle to carry a crumb up a nearly vertical surface. You root for them, though you know the odds are against their success. Babylon, after all, is a city that promises everything and delivers little. Still, the ants climb, the vines spread, the moss thickens, and the children laugh. For every wall, there is a counterforce, a quiet persistence that will not be denied. Sometimes you wonder if the gardens were ever meant to last. Perhaps they were only ever a gesture, a green promise against the relentless clay. But the walls, those patient, suffering walls, hold more life than any royal design. Here, where stone is rare and everything returns to mud, you learn that survival means finding a way to cling, to climb, to bloom in the cracks. You run your hand over a rough patch of plaster, feeling the cool dampness where a new vine has taken hold. Above you, a lizard flicks its tongue, unimpressed by kings or gardens or plans for eternity. Life in Babylon does not wait for permission. It crawls, quietly and stubbornly, wherever it pleases. If you want to know what Babylon really thinks, you do not ask a priest or a scribe or even one of the king's anxious advisors. You go to the market. The market is not just a place to buy onions, trade goats, or haggle over a chipped amphora. It is the city's true heart, a pulsing tangle of voices where every whisper, suspicion, and half forgotten secret is repeated, embroidered, and improved until it becomes indistinguishable from fact. Today, the market is thick with rumors. The hanging gardens, naturally, are everyone's favorite subject. A potter claims to have seen the queen herself wandering the unfinished terraces in a silk robe, trailing her fingers through damp leaves and sighing theatrically. A seller of figs swears that she is homesick and plans to run away to the north. Another insists the gardens are already finished, but the king is keeping them hidden, waiting for a sign from the gods or a shipment of new peacocks, whichever comes first. You drift from stall to stall, trying to separate invention from memory. At a fishmonger's, you hear that the chief architect has been seen crying at sunset, staring at the walls as if trying to remember which parts are real. A basket weaver, weaving faster than she can talk, claims that all the bricks are being stamped with a secret message, something only the truly loyal can read. I know a man who knows a man who knows, she says, her hands never stopping. The market is a battlefield for stories, and everyone is armed. Children dash between legs, shouting that they've found a tunnel under the gardens that leads all the way to the palace vaults. Their mothers shush them, not because they disbelieve, but because tunnels are always bad news, especially when they appear in stories before noon. A group of bricklayers sits in the shade, swapping tales of near disasters, walls that nearly fell, staircases that wobbled, pipes that burst with the force of a minor deity's curse. The more dramatic the failure, the better the story. Some rumors are hopeful. The gardens will bring rain. The king will open a new well. The river will flood just enough to make the barley grow, and not enough to wash away the lower quarters. These rumors are handled delicately, like eggs. They are repeated quietly, with glances over shoulders, as if saying them too loudly will break their fragile spell. Others are darker. You hear a wine cellar mutter about a laborer who vanished under a pile of bricks, his name already forgotten, his family told only that accidents happen. Someone else claims that the gods are angry, that the gardens, so high above the city, are in wow insult, a ladder built for mortals to climb into forbidden realms. There is talk of omens, crows nesting in the palace eaves, a river dolphin found dead in a flooded street, a single perfect lotus flower blooming in the wrong season. The omens, as always, mean whatever the speaker most fears. Everywhere you go, the story changes. The gardens are too dry, or too wet, or infested with frogs, or haunted by the ghosts of stonecutters who died before being paid. A young boy whispers that he has seen the king himself, arguing with the spirit of a great river god at midnight. You ask him for details, but he shrugs and runs off, already busy inventing something new. Some rumors have nothing to do with the gardens at all. You hear about a baker whose bread was found to contain a small, perfect pebble, proof, apparently, that her ovens are haunted by the jealous ghost of an old rival. There is talk of a traveling merchant who tried to pass off painted goats as rare foreign sheep, a scandal only rivaled by the story of the scribe who wrote love poems on tax records and was caught when a debtor tried to pay with a particularly romantic receipt. Gossip, like water, seeps into every crack. At the end of the row of stalls, an old woman sells herbs for everything from fever to heartbreak. She claims to know the truth about the gardens, the palace, the king, and the gods themselves, but only tells what people want to hear. News is only good if it is new, she says, stirring a pot of something green and mysterious, and if it makes you forget your real troubles. You watch a group of women sorting lentils, their hands moving with the careless grace of lifelong practice. They discuss the latest market thefts, who married who left town in the night, and who is rumored to have returned. One of them, face lined like a dried fig, pauses to ask you if you know anything about the gardens. You shrug, and she nods in understanding. Nobody knows anything in Babylon, and yet everyone knows more than they should. Every so often, a royal messenger passes through, robes clean, expression unreadable. The crowd falls silent for a moment. then resumes, just a little quieter, just a little more careful. Even the best rumors have limits, and no one wants to attract the wrong kind of notice. The messenger disappears, and the stories bubble up again, more cautious but no less creative. The market, for all its noise and muddle, is the city's archive. The scribes may write the official version, but here the truth is measured in laughter, in the sighs of the disappointed, in the raised eyebrows of those who have heard it all before. By sunset, today's rumors will be tomorrow's memories, and by morning, the cycle will begin again. What matters is not what is true, but what is believed, at least until the next story arrives. As you leave the market, the stories follow you, tales of gardens that rise and fall, of kings and queens, of gods and accidents, of walls that will stand forever and walls already covered with moss. You wonder which stories will survive, which will be forgotten, and which, in time, will become Babylon's new reality. In a city built on dust and dreams, you know better than to bet on anything lasting longer than a rumor. In Babylon, time is measured by the clatter of bricks and the size of men who lay them. Dawn creeps over the city in a hush of gray, and before the sun has properly decided to rise, the first workers are already gathering in the shadow of the unfinished gardens. You watch them assemble, a river of tunics, dusty and worn, each man carrying the memory of yesterday's aches and the certainty of tomorrow's blisters. Work begins with the familiar shuffle, laborers squatting to tie fraying sandals, young boys stretching arms barely strong enough to lift a bucket, old men spitting into the dust to test the wind. Overseers, robed in authority and impatience, stride up and down, their tally sticks already busy, their voices pitched just above a snarl. The day's tasks are barked out. Dig here, carry that. Stack these, fill those. No one listens too closely, because the tasks change as fast as the overseer's tempers, and because most have done the same work so many times that orders are little more than background noise. The sound of building is relentless. Hammers tap at bricks that do not want to fit. Ropes creak under the weight of soil and stone. Shovels bite at the earth as if it might finally yield something other than mud. You smell bitumen and sweat, river silt and clay. A cloud of gnats hovers over every water barrel, undeterred by curses or swinging hands. To work in Babylon is to be tired in 1,000 small, specific ways. You see the masons, hands permanently stained with the memory of every wall they have built and seen crumble. Their laughter is short, dry as sand, exchanged over cracked mugs and the promise of a single fig at noon. Apprentices stumble beneath loads too heavy for their pride, teeth clenched, eyes bright with that blend of hope and resignation that only youth can manage. There are no heroes here, only survivors and men too stubborn to do anything else. Lunch is not a pause, but a negotiation. The lucky eat bread and cheese in the rare shade. The unlucky chew on onions and dried fish, their meals flavored with grit and complaint. Water is always short, always warm, always carried up too many flights of stairs. By midday, the air itself feels tired, sagging over the gardens like a heavy blanket. The overseers threaten to fine the slow, to dismiss the weak, but everyone knows there are never enough hands to finish the work. A missing worker is only missed until another can be found. In the heat, tempers sharpen. Arguments flare over who should mix mortar, who should fetch bricks, who deserves to rest, and who should take the blame when a wall collapses. You hear every excuse. The bricks were crooked, the tools are cursed. It was like this when I found it. Sometimes a fight breaks out, quick, dusty, over before an overseer arrives. No one holds grudges, not for long. There is too much work and too little time to waste on remembering. The day wears on. You watch as the builders press on with aching backs and scraped knuckles, sweat running in muddy rivulets down their arms. They patch leaks in the irrigation channels with whatever is at hand, scraps of cloth, bits of old rope, even a shoe once when nothing else could be found. Every fix is temporary, every improvement another invitation for tomorrow's disaster. There is, in the monotony, a strange kind of pride. The oldest workers tell stories of when they built the palace, the walls, the very first terraces of the gardens. Their tales grow with each retelling, stones heavier, sun hotter, water farther from the river's edge. They boast, quietly, of bricks that have never fallen, corners that still stand straight. But even they admit that the city asks too much and gives back little more than the privilege of starting over again. Toward evening, the pace slows, shadows lengthen, stretching across unfinished walkways and piles of unused clay. The workers gather their tools, rinse hands in basins already brown with the day's dirt, and try to scrub away the feeling that tomorrow will be exactly the same. Some linger, staring up at the terraces, lost in private calculations. How many bricks left to lay? How many stories left to believe in? How many aches before the next day of rest? As the sun dips, the overseers make their final rounds, voices softer now, tally sticks tapping like the last raindrops of a passing storm. They mark the work that was done and the work that must be undone. The workers file away, shoulders drooping, each man shrinking into the city's crowds, indistinguishable until the next dawn calls them back. You linger a moment longer, watching the shadows claim the garden walls. You think of hands, hundreds, thousands, leaving their mark on every brick, every stone, every battered beam. In Babylon, the miracle is not that the gardens are being built, but that anyone keeps building at all. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. The laborers will return, the overseers will bark, the bricks will pile up, and the gardens will inch a little closer to whatever paradise the king has promised. And you, caught in the slow machinery of hope and exhaustion, will keep watching, wondering whether, in the end, it is the gardens or the workers themselves who are meant to last. By now, you have lost count of how many stories you have heard about the hanging gardens. Myths, Legends, boasts, nightmares all swirl through Babylon like the dust, coating every conversation with a layer of possibility and doubt. It does not matter if the gardens are finished or not, if the terraces rise as promised, or if the water flows where it should. In Babylon, belief matters more than bricks, and the myths have already grown taller than the walls themselves. Some say the gardens were planted in a single night, conjured by the king's magicians from bare earth and river mist. Others insist they sprang up where the queen's tears fell, each blossom proof that love can coax life from dust. There is a version whispered by children that the gardens are the work of restless ghosts, builders and dreamers who died with dirt under their fingernails and now spend eternity arranging flowers no living hand can touch. You have never seen a ghost, but you have seen plenty of men who looked as if they belonged to another world by the time their shift ended. Every market stall, every corner of the city breeds its own version of the myth. One day, Minghe, the gardens are a sanctuary for birds with jewel-colored feathers, parrots that repeat your secrets, peacocks that strut across terraces paved with gold. The next, they are filled with panthers and monkeys, wandering freely because the queen misses the wild north, and the king cannot deny her anything. In truth, the only animals you have seen in the gardens are goats, hungry, stubborn, indifferent to all ambitions, and a few stray cats who rule over the flower beds like miniature gods. The most popular myth is, of course, the love story. The queen, homesick for her mountains, weeps beneath the palace eaves, and the king vows to build her a piece of home, a mountain of green, a place where rain falls without clouds. This is repeated by every poet, scribe, and water seller, each adding a new detail: a secret lake on the highest terrace, nightingales that sing only for amethysts, a special tree whose fruit grants immortality. No one can agree on which mountain the queen missed, nor how many tears were required, but no one cares. In Babylon, love is the mortar that holds every impossible project together, at least until the first storm. Priests, eager for a share of the credit, spin their own tales. They claim the gardens were a gift from the gods, a test of devotion, or a sly challenge. Some say the terraces are shaped like the steps to heaven, a ladder the gods built downward for men to climb up. Others mutter darkly that the gardens are a provocation, a human attempt to rival the divine, and that the gods watch with narrowed eyes, deciding whether to be amused or offended. You see the priests wander the construction site in their clean robes, offering blessings, sprinkling water that is always a little too clean to be from the city's wells. Builders have their own stories, some hopeful, some bitter. One tells of a magic brick lost somewhere in the foundation that keeps the walls from falling. Another claims that every layer must be finished in silence, or the plants will wither from hurt feelings. There are superstitions about the best day to plant vines, the right words to say before mixing mortar, and the exact shape a terrace must take to keep evil spirits at bay. These stories are shared in the shade between mouthfuls of stale bread, and everyone pretends to believe, if only to keep the conversation going. Skeptics thrive hears it too. The gardens, they say, are an illusion, smoke and mirrors, a trick of the king's favorite architects. Some insist the real gardens are hidden away, deep within the palace, shown only to favored guests, or perhaps not built at all. There are rumors that the queen is unimpressed, that the king is furious, that the architects are planning their escape to distant lands where the soil is more forgiving. Each rumor feeds the next, and you watch as the stories spiral faster than any staircase. Children invent their own explanations for the garden's delays. Some say that a dragon sleeps under the lowest terrace and must be fed a goat each week, or the walls will collapse. Others claim the plants are enchanted and must be sung to every night, and that is why the guards walk their rounds humming off key tunes. You hear these stories and remember your own childhood when magic seemed as reasonable as mud and gardens could appear anywhere if only you wanted them badly enough. There is a story you never share, the one that no one wants to tell. It is the story of gardens built not from love, but from pride. A king who cannot bear the thought of being forgotten, who stacks brick upon brick, not for a queen's happiness, but for his own name. You see it sometimes in the way the overseers speak his titles, in the way the scribes write his victories, in the blank eyes of statues that line the palace courtyards. This myth is less comforting, and so it is quietly ignored, buried under sweeter tales. Every festival brings new legends. Poets compose verses about water that never dries, trees that bloom in every season, and fruit that grants visions of the future. The storytellers are tireless, their audience never satisfied. By the time the sun sets, the myths have grown so tangled that even the gods must struggle to keep track. In the end, it hardly matters which stories are true. You walk through the city and see the shape of the gardens rising, real and imagined, in every corner of Babylon. The walls may crack, the terraces may sag, the water may run out, but the myths hold firm, watered by hope and repetition. They are what remain when the bricks return to mud, when the river shifts, when the names are worn away. As night falls, you pause by the edge of the unfinished gardens. In the fading light, the shadows of vines and scaffolding twist together, taking the shape of all the stories you have ever heard and all the ones you will surely hear again tomorrow. There comes a day, inevitably, when the city gathers to witness the first sprouting of green in the hanging gardens. It is supposed to be a moment of triumph, a breath of paradise drawn into Babylon's dusty lungs. Word travels fast, faster than water, faster even than rumor. The terraces are ready, the soil arranged in perfect layers, the irrigation channels, for once, mostly behaving themselves. Even the king is rumored to be watching, his gaze stern from a shadowed balcony, while the queen, hidden behind an embroidered veil, waits for her own small miracle. You find a place at the edge of the lowest terrace, squeezed between a baker's apprentice who smells of yeast and a sweating merchant whose eyes dart from worker to overseer and back. The crowd swells, priests in clean robes, architects shuffling their tablets, laborers standing a little straighter than usual, their hands washed for the occasion. Some children are lifted onto shoulders. The unlucky ones scramble up stonework or dangle from scaffolding, determined not to miss the spectacle, whatever it turns out to be. At first, it is almost anticlimactic. The head gardener, chosen less for his green thumb than for his ability to recite blessings in three languages, stands before the gathered crowd, clutching a basket of cuttings and seeds. There is a small speech, translated twice, neither version more inspiring than the other. With the blessing of the gods, the favor of the king, and the sweat of all Babylon, let these gardens grow, he intones, his voice cracking only slightly. The crowd applauds dutifully. Someone starts a cheer, but it fizzles into an embarrassed cough. The planting begins. Soil is pressed around the roots with careful hands. Water is poured from fine clay pitchers, though you notice most of it splashes onto the stones, forming little muddy rivers that run away before anyone can stop them. The first leaves, some drooping, some stubbornly curled, are tucked into place. Flowers, chosen for color and, it seems, for their ability to wilt under scrutiny, are set at the terrace edge where everyone can see. For a moment, the city holds its breath. Here is the miracle at last. Living green, proof that all the arguments, all the aching backs and blistered hands have not been entirely wasted. A breeze stirs, and the new leaves tremble as if uncertain whether to stay or flee. The priests nod, the architects smile, the children crane their necks for a better look. A single butterfly flutters by, and for an instant it seems as if Babylon itself might bloom. Then the gardener steps back, wipes his brow, and surveys his work. His expression, perfectly visible to all, shifts from pride to worry, and then settles into a familiar Babylonian gloom. He circles the nearest sapling, pokes at a wilted blossom, sighs deeply. It is the sound of disappointment, old and bottomless, the same sigh you have heard from bricklayers inspecting a new crack or water haulers discovering another leak. The crowd senses it, and the mood falters. Someone in the back mutters that the leaves look yellow. Another wonders aloud why the flowers smell of river mud. The architects gather, their whispered debate quickly escalating. Too little sunlight, says one. Too much water, says another. A third blames the wrong kind of soil, and a fourth quietly curses the man who brought seeds from the north, as if foreign roots could ever take hold in Babylon's ancient dust. The overseers, sensing a threat to their dignity, point out that their job is to move bricks, not clouds. The priests, alarmed, offer another blessing, longer, louder, and less convincing. You watch as the crowd's excitement sours into something familiar and sour, a shared discomfort, the certainty that even miracles come with conditions in Babylon. Children are told not to touch the flowers. Someone hurries off to fetch more water, though by the time they return, most of the leaves have already begun to droop. The merchant beside you shakes his head, muttering that his wife's courtyard boasts better roses. In the days that follow, the story changes, as stories always do. The first greenery is remembered fondly, then with irritation, and finally with sarcasm. The plants are replaced or rearranged, their failures blamed on the weather, on bad luck, on the jealousy of the gods. New cuttings appear each morning, some uprooted by the evening. The head gardener becomes a figure of pity and gentle mockery, forever chasing an impossible shade of green. The queen's reaction, if she has one, is never made public. Some say she wept for joy. Others claim she ordered the entire terrace replanted at dawn. There are small victories. Here and there, a vine clings and refuses to die. A cluster of blue flowers braves the sun. A pomegranate seedling survives long enough to be noticed. But these triumphs are modest, easily overlooked. The grand vision, the paradise promised by poets and planners, is postponed again. A new round of arguments erupts over what to plant next, who to blame for the failures, and which terrace should be sacrificed to the shade. As you pass the gardens day after day, you become an expert in disappointment. You learn to spot the signs, the wilt before noon, the patch of mold spreading on the lower walls, the silent exchange between overseer and gardener as they debate whether to admit defeat or try again. The city, meanwhile, continues to hope, because hope is easier than admitting the obvious. Babylon will have its gardens, even if it must pretend for a while longer. Some evenings, when the sun is low and the terraces glow gold for a moment, you almost believe the miracle has taken root. The walls are green in the fading light. The air carries a hint of jasmine and wet earth, and for a moment the city feels less weary. But then the wind changes, the leaves droop, and reality settles back in. The first greenery fades. The disappointed look lingers, as steady as the dust. You move on because there is always another planting, another promise, another crowd waiting to believe. In Babylon, paradise is always just one more season away. Every great city, you are told, is built on memory. In Babylon, memory is a slippery, shifting thing, a fine dust that settles on every face and creeps into every story, blurring the edges until all that remains are names half remembered and deeds half finished. The city rises terrace by terrace, wall by wall, on the bones of old ambitions and the backs of the nameless many. If you pause at dawn, when the shadows are long and the air still, you can almost feel the weight of all that has been forgotten pressing in from every side. Walk through the construction sites and you will see it, evidence of 1,000 lives now ground into the earth. The remains of an old sandal, the hilt of a broken tool, a child's clay toy swept into a pile of rubble and buried beneath the next layer of bricks. Each artifact, ordinary and unremarkable, is a whisper from someone who once had a place here. They vanish quietly, swallowed by the next day's work and the endless push to build higher, greener, grander. The men and women who labor on the gardens, whose hands coax mud into walls and plant seeds in stubborn soil, come and go with the seasons. Some are paid, some are bound by debts, some are simply caught up in the current of the city's ambition. A few will be remembered, briefly, in a line of poetry, the record of an overseer, a faded story repeated in the market. But most vanish without ceremony, their names lost faster than the gardens themselves can take root. There is a small ritual among the oldest workers. When a colleague disappears, swallowed by a collapsed wall, swept away by the river, or simply gone without explanation, a handful of earth is tossed onto the nearest terrace, a quiet acknowledgement that no one here is permanent. The earth, after all, is the only constant. It receives the living and the dead, holds their memories in silence, and covers them with more dust. You watch as the king's scribes wander the site, their wax tablets heavy with numbers and names. They record each delivery of bricks, each shipment of timber, every man and woman assigned to a shift. But records are lost, miscopied, eaten by mice or the river's damp. Names slip from the clay as easily as water runs through a sieve. In the end, what matters is not who built the gardens, but that the gardens were built, at least for a while. The city's older quarters are full of stories about those who came before. The nameless architect who dreamed of a stairway taller than the walls. The foreman who tried to save a collapsing terrace with his bare hands. The gardener who grew the only rose that bloomed out of season. Their fates are uncertain, their names changed or confused, the details polished smooth by the passing of years. Children repeat the stories, but only the parts that sound miraculous or absurd. The rest dissolves into rumor, then silence. Sometimes a worker will try to carve his name into a brick or scratch a mark onto a hidden wall, a small act of rebellion against the city's appetite for forgetting. Most of these marks are erased by the next layer of plaster or worn away by rain and the touch of 1,000 careless hands. The few that remain are mysteries for the next generation, a crooked symbol, a word in a forgotten tongue, a face etched in haste. They linger longer than the men who made them. The priests and poets promise that memory survives in the gardens themselves, that every leaf, every stone, every drop of water carries a story. You want to believe them, but you have seen too many stories, drowned by the river, swept away by wind, buried by the next king's project. In Babylon, eternity is measured not in years, but in how long it takes for dust to hide your footprints. There are memorials, of course, official, public, carefully tended, statues of kings, tablets carved with lists of great men, walls adorned with victories that belong to rulers long dead. These monuments are no less vulnerable than anything else. The river eats away their foundations, moss creeps over their faces, the sun fades their inscriptions. In time, the statues topple, the tablets crack, the walls fall. New rulers build over the ruins, adding new names to the endless catalog of ambition. You stand in the shadow of the gardens, watching workers shuffle past, faces smeared with clay, voices hoarse from the dust. Some will die here, known only to their friends and the men who take their places. Some will wander off in search of easier work, their names replaced by others who will do the same. You realize that you too are part of this slow forgetting, a witness perhaps, but not immune. The sands of time do not discriminate. They settle on the mighty and the meek, on kings and slaves, on plans that changed the world and plans that changed nothing. The gardens, for all their promise, are as temporary as the footprints in the river mud. One day, their terraces will crumble, their trees wither, their stories shrink to a handful of names in a half remembered tale. Yet, there is comfort in this impermanence. The dust is not just an end, but a beginning. Every forgotten name is a space for someone new. Every erased story makes room for another. In Babylon, memory is fleeting, but life is stubborn. The city rises, falls, and rises again, built on the hope that this time something will last. And perhaps it will, not in the stones or the walls, but in the small acts of those who lived and worked, laughed and failed, and dared, if only for a moment, to leave their mark in the shifting sand. You brush your hand over a patch of wall, feeling the rough surface beneath your fingers. Somewhere, under layers of plaster and dust, a name lingers, almost remembered. You do not know whose it is, but for a moment, in the quiet between stories, you remember enough. Night in Babylon is not a relief. It is only a different kind of burden, exchanged with the sun rather than lifted. When dusk finally overtakes the city, painting the river bronze and the gardens dark, the heat does not truly fade. The walls, soaked through with sun, sweat it back into the narrow streets and courtyards, as if the city refuses to let go of anything, even discomfort. You find yourself drifting with the evening crowd, looking for a patch of breeze, a promise of sleep that the city is too restless to keep. The first sign of night's approach is the slow procession of tired bodies. Workers shuffle home, their steps dragging, shoulders hunched under invisible loads. The market clears and fits and starts. Sellers counting out the last of their coins, children herded away with half-eaten dates, dogs sniffing for scraps that the crows have overlooked. Lamps are lit, more to chase away the insects than the dark, and their yellow light wavers on the chipped walls. Babylon is too practical for superstition, but you notice that doors are bolted, offerings placed on windowsills, and at least one old woman muttering a prayer at every crossroads. You would like to believe that night brings quiet, but Babylon cannot help itself. The city is built for sound, even in darkness. Somewhere, a baby wails, answered by the low singing of a mother rocking in a patch of fading moonlight. A band of musicians, too poor or too stubborn to stop playing, scrape tired melodies from flutes and drums, their rhythms wandering with the river breeze. A drunk shouts for a lost friend. A pair of lovers argue in whispers by the ruined wall of a warehouse. Sleep in Babylon is a rumor, always spoken of, rarely witnessed. There are those who work through the night. Watchmen patrol the walls, sandals slapping on baked brick, eyes stinging from the last hour's smoke. They are not looking for invaders. Their greatest enemies are fire, drunkenness, and the wild laughter of youth. They gossip to stay awake, swapping the latest news of the gardens or the king, all the while glancing up at the terraces as if they expect them to collapse in the moonlight. Elsewhere, the city's craftsmen work by lamplight, potters at their wheels, weavers hunched over looms, bakers kneading tomorrow's bread. The brick kilns never sleep. At night, their fires are even brighter, a line of sullen orange eyes winking at the sky. The foreman doze against the warm walls, rousing only to snap at an apprentice or count the last batch of tiles. The air is thick with the smell of yeast and scorched clay, heavy enough to make your dreams stick to your skin. You are not immune to the city's insomnia. Your own bed, a mat laid on a floor of hard packed earth, offers no comfort. The heat lingers, sweat beating at your temples. Mosquitoes, bred in the city's thousand puddles, wage war against every inch of exposed flesh. You listen to their whine and to the muffled voices drifting in from the courtyard. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs, a harsh, familiar sound. No one rises to help. In Babylon, coughs are as common as dust. Some nights, the river brings a hint of coolness, a breeze that slips over the walls and shudders through the reeds. For a moment, you allow yourself to believe that you might sleep, that the city's noise will fade, and you will dream of green things, of terraces alive with flowers that do not wilt by noon. But the breeze is always fleeting, snatched away by the restless press of the city's breath. The air grows close again, stifling and unmoving, and you lie awake, counting the stars or the distant shouts of a quarrel you cannot see. You think of the gardens rising in the dark, their plants drooping even in the moonlight, roots seeking water that is never quite enough. Somewhere, a night watchman circles the terraces, his lamp bobbing like a tired firefly, feet echoing off stone and wet clay. He pauses to listen. Was that a crack in the wall, a whisper of water leaking, or simply the city sighing in its sleep? Sometimes, if you sit quietly enough, you can hear the ancient heart of Babylon. Not the speeches or the hymns, but the slow, private conversations of the sleepless. Old men talk softly about seasons past, naming years by floods and droughts. Women tell stories to the children who cannot rest, fables in which heroes always return and gardens always flourish. Laborers grumble in the half light, their complaints blending with the croaking of frogs and the distant barking of dogs. In Babylon, exhaustion is a common language. You realize that the city's true dreamers are those who lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, imagining how things might have been. Perhaps the king is awake as well, pacing his marble floor, haunted by promises and the memory of what the gardens were meant to be. Perhaps the queen dreams of green mountains and colder nights, a land where sleep is possible and air is sweet. On rare nights, when the moon is high and the city is hushed for a moment, you dare to hope. You listen for the sound of water trickling through the channels, the soft rustle of new leaves, the promise of a breeze that never arrives. For a breathless instant, you almost believe that sleep will come, and with it, dreams of a cooler, gentler Babylon. But the city does not sleep. It stirs and mutters, clings to its worries, and passes the night the only way it knows how, wide eyed, sweating, and waiting for the slow, gray promise of dawn. Babylon is a city of grand designs and grander mishaps. If you believe the architects, every wall stands as planned, every arch rises in perfect balance, and every channel flows with the precision of a celestial map. If you believe your own eyes and the muttered curses of the laborers, nothing is ever quite as intended. For every finished terrace in the hanging gardens, there are two that lean, sag, or threaten to collapse entirely if you so much as breathe too hard. The first cracks appear before the first flowers. Some say it is the heat, others the river's stubborn insistence on moving, and others still blame the clay, which was always too soft, too reluctant to keep its shape. The truth is simpler and far less poetic. The gardens are ambitious, the plans are optimistic, and the hands that shape the city are only human. Mistakes are never in short supply. You walk the site and see them everywhere. A wall listing awkwardly, stairways narrowing at odd angles, channels that begin confidently and then disappear into a blind alley of mud and weeds. One day, a terrace is level, the next, it dips like a tired spine. Some days the irrigation works too well, flooding a section and drowning the new plantings in mud. Other days, the water vanishes completely, leaving roots to shrivel and gardeners to mutter about sabotage. The city has a system for dealing with errors, though system is too generous a word. There are meetings, always meetings. Scribes arrive with armfuls of tablets, architects with their drawings, overseers with the defensive posture of men already blamed for too much. Fingers are pointed, voices rise. Someone always remembers to blame the previous shift. The phrase, unexpected settling, becomes a mantra, repeated so often it loses meaning. This is Babylon, someone says. Nothing stays where you put it. You notice that errors, once discovered, breed with alarming speed. A small crack draws curious glances, then a crowd, then an argument. By the time a solution is proposed, the crack has doubled and new ones are branching away like a family of snakes. Workers patch the obvious faults, adding fresh clay or a bit more bitumen, but the repairs are as temporary as a rumor in the market. Everyone pretends not to notice when the same wall is mended a second, third, or fourth time. When a real disaster strikes, a collapsed arch, a wall that simply gives up and melts into the riverbank, the hunt for the guilty begins. Overseers become hawks, prowling the site with their sticks and their questions. Whose idea was this? Who approved that? Which unlucky laborer was on duty when the wall slipped? Names are written down, shouted out, often spelled wrong. An engineer is summoned to explain the mathematics. He mutters about load and gravity, then quietly disappears. Apprentices are interrogated. Did you mix the mortar as instructed? Did you measure twice before laying the bricks? No one ever admits to a mistake outright. It is always the fault of the clay, the weather, or the previous administration. Sometimes, in the heat of accusation, a scapegoat is chosen. A worker with a bad record, an overseer already unpopular, a foreigner who does not speak the language well. They are blamed, fined, dismissed, or, on the worst days, paraded through the market as an example. The city demands its pound of flesh, but rarely learns from the spectacle. You have seen men sent away, heads bowed, only to be rehired a week later under a different name. The architects are clever at shifting blame. The plans were changed without my knowledge, says one, rolling up his drawings as if they are talismans. The materials were inferior, claims another, eyeing the supply carts with suspicion. The chief engineer, ancient and unflappable, simply shrugs. All things settle, he says. Babylon is built on compromise. You are not sure if he means the soil or the people. The king's advisors demand accountability. They summon reports and records, demand to know how a terrace that looked perfect at dawn can resemble a ruin by nightfall. Scribes hurry to rewrite the history, mistakes erased, names changed, new excuses invented. The official story will mention minor adjustments, necessary improvements, and unforeseen challenges, but never failure. In Babylon, failure is something that happens to other people, preferably far away. You have learned to recognize the look of a man who knows he will be blamed. It is a careful blend of defensiveness and resignation, of practiced explanations and silent prayers. The laborers expect little more than a lecture, the overseers, perhaps, a pay cut or a public scolding. The architects, secure in their cleverness, promise that next time will be different. The truth is, the city itself seems to conspire against perfection. The river shifts its banks, undermining the foundations. The clay, soft and sly, swells and shrinks with the seasons. The very air seems to lean against the walls, waiting for a moment of weakness. In Babylon, every project is provisional, every achievement ready to slip back into the mud at the first sign of neglect. And yet, the work continues. Walls are rebuilt, terraces re-leveled, channels redirected. Each new mistake is absorbed into the city's memory, retold as a lesson or a joke or a warning. The search for the guilty will never end because the city itself is restless, never finished, never still. As evening falls, you hear the sound of argument echoing from the gardens. The shadows are long, the air thick with accusation and apology. Another wall leans, another scapegoat is found. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, and Babylon will wake to another day of errors and blame, each one layered atop the last. like bricks in a wall that refuses to stand straight. You would think, in a city forever under construction, there would be no time for celebration. But Babylon is never short on reasons to stop working, at least for a moment, and to declare that today is sacred, special, or at the very least, slightly less miserable than the day before. When festival time comes, the city transforms. Streets are swept, banners are unfurled, and every cracked wall is covered with a tapestry or garland. For a little while, the dust of daily struggle is replaced by the dust of a parade. No one seems certain how many festivals Babylon actually has. Some say the gods themselves have lost count, bemused by the endless cycle of rites, sacrifices, and awkward dances. The new gardens are an excuse for even more rituals, dedications, blessings, processions, all intended to persuade the spirits of earth and sky that this time the project will succeed. Priests, dignified and drowsy, recite invocations older than the city itself, their voices rising in unison with the braying of goats and the muttered complaints of those who would rather be napping. Preparations begin days in advance. Artisans decorate the gates with garlands of faded flowers and hastily woven wreaths. Children are sent to gather branches for the sacred fires, and if a few come back with stolen fruit or a new bruise, no one asks too many questions. Vendors sharpen their knives and pile their stalls with cakes, honey, and the kind of dried fish only tolerated during a festival. Musicians tune their lyres, though some simply pretend, confident that in the crowd nobody will notice a few sour notes. On the morning of the main ceremony, the city wakes early, or, more truthfully, never slept at all. Families line the streets in their cleanest tunics, faces scrubbed, children half asleep, but excited by the promise of sweets and stories. The king's guards patrol with unusual formality, helmets gleaming in the sun, attempting to look both festive and fearsome. Somewhere in the crowd, a goat chews through a decorative wreath, unbothered by the shouts of its handler. The centerpiece of the day is always a procession, priests leading the way, followed by musicians, then a stream of workers and dignitaries, and finally, a line of animals destined for the altars. The city's sacred statues, rarely moved except on festival days, sway precariously atop wooden platforms, carried by the most trusted laborers who are chosen less for their piety than for their muscles. Everyone is watched closely. Dropping a god statue is a bad omen, and no one wants to be blamed for the next season's drought. At the gardens, the rituals are endless. Priests climb the terraces, scattering grain and muttering prayers, stopping at every corner to sprinkle water or wine, sometimes both. Incense is burned until the air is thick and sweet, masking the more familiar scents of mud and bitumen. The queen is there, at least in theory, her presence glimpsed behind a fluttering curtain, her attendants fanning her with palm leaves, or perhaps just waving the flies away. The king gives a speech, full of hope and grand promises, pausing every few sentences for the crowd's dutiful applause. Everyone knows the script by heart. Bless the bricks, Anoint the walls, name the gods, and promise more offerings if only the gardens will thrive. Sometimes a sheep is led up the stairs, confused and anxious, to be sacrificed on an altar hastily built from bricks that will be needed for real construction the next day. The priests wave their arms, the crowd gasps, and somewhere a child laughs at the goat trying to eat a garland from the king's chariot. If there is a purpose to all of this, it is not efficiency. The rituals are slow, repetitive, and sometimes contradictory. One priest calls for silence, another for drums. A third insists that only left handed boys can scatter the holy grain. The elders claim it has always been this way. The younger generation suspects that the rituals grow longer with every festival, as if repetition alone might persuade the gods to take notice. Some workers whisper that the gods must be as bored as they are. By midday, the heat is oppressive, the crowd restive. The dignitaries retire to their shaded tents, where they drink warm beer and make toasts to each other's health. The rest of the city seeks what comfort it can. Children splash in the muddy irrigation channels. Elders sit beneath battered awnings. Artisans fan themselves with scraps of papyrus. The market does brisk business, selling sweets shaped like lions and fake amulets said to bring luck in love or protection against wasps. When evening comes, there is music and feasting. Tables groan beneath platters of stewed lamb, barley cakes, figs, and whatever fruit the city has managed to coax from its tired gardens. Wine flows, arguments begin and are quickly forgotten, and the air is thick with smoke from 100 small fires. The city, for a few precious hours, feels almost happy, almost free from the weight of unfinished terraces and unfulfilled promises. As darkness falls, the priests gather for the final rites. They thank the gods for their patience, beg forgiveness for any errors, and promise better offerings next time. A final blessing is murmured over the gardens, and the crowd disperses, feet aching, heads spinning with smoke and sun. The workers are already thinking of tomorrow, when the tapestries will be taken down, the altars dismantled, and the real work resumed. You linger as the last songs fade and the lamps sputter. You watch the city settle back into its familiar posture, the festival spirit evaporating like dew on a terrace stone. The rituals, for all their length and spectacle, change nothing. The cracks are still in the walls, the water still leaks, and the gardens remain unfinished. Yet for a day, Babylon remembered how to celebrate, and that is something. A small miracle, stubborn and fleeting, in a city that knows both too much labor and too little joy. It is said that every garden in Babylon grows under the eye of a wise man. In the Hanging Gardens, that man is not the chief architect, nor the king, nor any priest with a list of blessings and a basket of amulets. It is the gardener, old, hunched, hands as gnarled as olive branches, eyes narrowed against both the sun and the parade of optimism he sees pass through the terraces each day. His name, if you can remember it, is Marduk Nasser, but most simply call him the one who complains. You see him every morning, arriving before the sun fully warms the bricks, examining every vine, every patch of drooping greenery. He pokes at the soil with a stick, mutters at the weeds, and occasionally swears at the water channels that never flow as they should. His shirt is always damp, his hair perpetually dusted with dried petals and bits of mud. If you greet him, he grunts in response, busy cataloging new disappointments. It is not that he hates gardens. No, it is that he has lived long enough to expect the worst. Everything in Babylon struggles, he tells you, voice flat as the Euphrates at noon. People, bricks, roots. You plant a fig, and the sun kills it. You try a poplar, and the water rots it. The river gives mud, the mud gives weeds, and the only thing that grows well is whatever you did not plant. There are legends about gardener philosophers in other cities, men who commune with the seasons, who coax impossible beauty from the earth, who claim the wisdom of trees. Marduk Nasser has no patience for such tales. Those are stories for fools, he says, stooping to pull a sickly weed. A real gardener knows that green things grow when and where they please, and usually only to spite you. He has opinions about every plant in the gardens. The pomegranate is too proud. The cypress never wanted to leave the north. The jasmine is lazy. The lilies fragile as promises. The reeds too clever by half. If a vine climbs well, he shakes his head and predicts locusts. If a flower blooms, he worries it will attract snakes. The only living things he trusts are the cats, who nap among the roots and glare at anyone who approaches. They understand Babylon, he says. They expect nothing and complain when they do not get it. When the king's overseers come through with questions and advice, he listens in silence. They suggest more water, richer soil, moving the plants to catch more sunlight. He nods, then does exactly as he was doing before. They know nothing, he tells you afterward. They want magic. Magic is for poets. I am only a gardener. Sometimes a young apprentice will be sent to learn from him, full of hope and questions. Marduk Nasir teaches them to recognize the scent of rot, the color of blight, and the meaning of silence. Most leave after a week, discouraged by the lack of miracles. The workers joke about his gloom, saying he could wilt a tree just by staring at it. Children dare each other to bring him bouquets, watching from a safe distance as he inspects their offerings for mold or hidden thorns. The priests try to convert him to hope, but he listens with the bored patience of a man who has seen too many rituals and too few results. Yet, for all his complaints, there is no denying his skill. Where he tends, things do not thrive, but they survive. He knows when to water and when to wait, when to cut and when to leave a dying plant to its fate. He can coax a grapevine to cling to a wall, even if the grapes are small and sour. He can spot the beginnings of mildew or pests before anyone else, and he rarely wastes time on lost causes. Better to start again than waste good water on a doomed shrub. he says, snapping a brittle stem and tossing it aside. Sometimes, in quieter moments, he reveals a softer side. You find him, late in the day, sitting beneath a half grown fig tree, humming an old song to himself, surrounded by more weeds than flowers. He watches the sunset, counting the hours until the next disappointment. Babylon was not made for gardens, he sighs, but someone has to try. You realize that his philosophy is the city's philosophy: hope, quickly tempered by reality, effort, followed by failure, then more effort. The king dreams of paradise, he says. The city dreams of shade. I dream of a day without mud on my sandals. He shrugs. Dreams are dreams. His advice is always the same, whether you ask about plants or life. Wait, watch, be ready to start again. The gardens, under his care, are never lush, never a wonder of the world, but they endure. A patch of green in a city of clay, stubborn as a weed in the cracks of a palace wall. As the sky darkens, you thank him for his time, and he only snorts. Come back tomorrow, he says. There will be new problems by then. Babylon always promises that much. And you know he is right. In the Hanging Gardens, as in Babylon itself, survival is less a miracle than a daily argument with disappointment, a stubbornness that endures long after the last story of paradise has faded into dust. In Babylon, stories linger longer than bricks. The city's legends twist through the alleys and over the rooftops, uncoiling like the vines that creep along the half finished terraces of the Hanging Gardens. Everyone has a favorite tale, and none of them are entirely true. Hope in Babylon is a rumor repeated until it feels real, and then, when reality intrudes, it becomes something else: a legend, a caution, or a private joke. The oldest story is the one you hear most often: the legend that the Hanging Gardens never existed at all. The children tell it in whispers, eyes wide as they peer through the gaps in the garden walls. It is only a trick, they say, a story for foreigners and dreamers, a promise that the city will never have to keep. In this version, the gardens are a mirage, painted on the minds of those who most need to believe that Babylon could grow green things, that paradise is possible in a city of dust. Some say the gardens are finished, but only for the eyes of the king and his guests. They claim that a secret entrance leads to a hidden paradise, lush and cool, with fountains that never run dry and birds that sing the queen's name. Those who claim to have seen it are never quite sure what they saw. Their stories change with every telling. It was more beautiful than the rivers, swears one. There were flowers that spoke and trees that wept. But always, in the end, the storyteller shrugs and admits it might have been a dream, or a trick of the light, or a memory borrowed from someone else. There are darker legends, too: a shadowy figure seen after sunset, tending ghostly plants that bloom only under the moon. Some say it is the spirit of a worker who died during the garden's construction, forever doomed to finish what the living could not. Others whisper of curses laid by jealous gods, offended by human ambition. Every wilted vine, every collapsed wall, a sign that paradise is forbidden ground. The priests neither confirm nor deny these stories. They know better than to argue with a legend that keeps people hopeful and afraid in equal measure. Among the laborers, the stories are more practical, but no less haunting. They talk of friends lost beneath fallen terraces, of wages promised and never paid, of days so hot the water turned to steam before it touched the soil. Hope, for them, is measured not in miracles, but in the shade of a wall at midday, or the promise of a day's work that does not end in disaster. Still, they pass on the tales of gardens that will bloom tomorrow, or next week, or in the reign of the next king. For the merchants, the legends are simply another form of currency. They sell painted tiles and carved stones said to come from the sacred terraces, little jars of garden water rumored to bring luck or fertility. Foreign visitors are told whatever they most want to hear, that the gardens are nearly done, that they are ancient and eternal, that the queen herself visits every morning to feed a golden peacock. No one bothers to correct the stories, and why should they? In Babylon, hope sells as well as onions. The city's children invent new legends each season. The gardens are home to magical cats who guard the gates at night, to a family of tiny river dragons who nest in the water channels, to a secret stairway that leads straight to the stars. Their hopes are bright and improbable, untroubled by the failures of the adults who sigh over each new crack in the walls. Some nights, you hear them playing beneath the terraces, chanting made up prayers to imaginary gods, unbothered by the warnings and worries that fill the city by day. Yet beneath all the laughter and invention, there is an undercurrent of disappointment that never quite fades. You see it in the way people glance at the terraces, looking for the green that never seems to last. You hear it in the weary jokes shared by the workers, in the cautious promises made by architects, in the careful optimism of priests who bless the gardens but avoid making predictions. Even the king's speeches, grand and echoing, are tinged with the knowledge that hope must be managed carefully or it will slip away entirely. Some say Babylon's true talent is not in building, but in forgetting. When a dream fails, it is buried beneath new plans, new promises, new stories. The old legends fade, replaced by fresher ones, until only a few remember the disappointments at their core. The river washes away the footprints, the sun bleaches the writing from the tablets, and life continues. Hope is recycled, old doubts woven into new myths. In this way, the city endures. Sometimes, at sunset, you stand by the garden walls and listen to the murmur of stories, part memory, part wish, part warning. You realize that in Babylon, hope is both a burden and a shield. It protects the city from despair, but weighs it down with endless expectations. It is the one thing everyone shares, even as they argue about what was, what is, and what will never be. The hanging gardens, finished or not, have become the city's greatest legend, Precisely because they remain unfinished, their promise is more powerful than any reality, and their failure is more forgiving than any triumph. In the gaps between stone and story, Babylon finds its truest self, persistent, imaginative, never quite satisfied, and always ready to believe. Just one more time that tomorrow the gardens will finally bloom. As darkness falls and the city's legends gather with the night air, you wonder which stories will be told after you are gone, and which hopes will outlast even the ruins. In Babylon, it is the legends and the lost hopes beneath them that never truly die. Dawn comes, as it always does in Babylon, heavy with heat and the stubborn promise of another day. You stand at the edge of the city's walls, looking out over the terraces that climb and twist above the mud and the markets. The first light catches on damp bricks, glints off the morning dew, and paints every promise with a gold that fades as soon as you blink. This is the hour of quiet, before the complaints and the shouting and the machinery of hope begin again. You have come here for a reason, though you might struggle to name it. Curiosity, perhaps. Habit, more likely. You stand with your hands on the rough parapet, watching the city wake below, vendors arranging their tired wares, laborers rubbing sleep from their eyes, priests shuffling through the motions of yet another prayer for rain or mercy, or a miracle that will never quite arrive. The gardens rise before you, a silhouette against the pale sky. You squint, waiting for the green to catch fire, for the impossible to reveal itself at last. Nothing happens. The walls remain patched and stained. The terraces are still, empty save for a stray cat hunting moths among last season's dry vines. Somewhere a bird calls, but its song is thin, already lost to the wind. You are not disappointed, not exactly. You are used to Babylon's ways by now. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the city's collective sigh, the sound of expectation deflating, of ambition folding itself back into practicality. The hanging gardens, wonder of the world, stand as they always have, unfinished, overgrown, more legend than life. The workers arrive, glance at the terraces, and then turn their attention to the tasks that actually feed them. An overseer walks past, pretending not to see the new cracks spreading up a half completed wall. The gardener philosopher arrives, shakes his head at the latest wilted leaves, and sets about his slow routine of tending, cutting, and muttering. You find yourself amused by the grandness of it all, the speeches, the festivals, the scribes with their wax tablets and their urgent records of triumph. Somewhere in the palace, the king is probably composing his next decree, while the queen, if she is there at all, waits for another shipment of seeds from a homeland that grows farther away with every sunrise. The priests are already planning the next round of rituals, as if the right words could change the nature of the soil or the minds of the gods. There is, you realize, something beautifully absurd about the entire city standing in awe of a garden that never quite arrives. Tourists come, invited or not, to stare at what they cannot find. Poets write verses about the shade they never sat beneath. Merchants sell trinkets with pressed flowers and shards of painted tile from the gardens, they swear, though even they no longer believe it. Children play in the shadows, inventing new stories to replace the old ones. They climb the terraces and declare themselves kings or queens of green kingdoms that exist only for an hour. You recall the myths that brought you here, the queen's tears, the king's pride, the architect's clever hands. But as you stand in the morning light, the truth is harder and stranger. The gardens were never really here, not the way anyone hoped. What grew best in Babylon was not jasmine or cypress or fig, but the idea of gardens, the hunger for something miraculous amid all the mud and misery. You laugh, softly, so as not to wake the workers below. In a city where memory is measured in dust, perhaps the greatest miracle is that anyone remembers to dream at all. The hanging gardens are more real in the stories, in the sighs of old men and the games of children, than in the tangled vines and crumbling terraces before you. There is irony here, of course, but also a kind of relief. The city survives, gardens or no gardens. Life goes on, with or without the green promises stacked above the river. The sun climbs, the merchants shout, the children run, the gardeners curse, and hope returns, disguised as tomorrow's project. Babylon's true wonder is not in what is built, but in the refusal to stop building, in the comfort found in unfinished dreams. You lean against the parapet, feeling the rough stone beneath your palms, and you realize the city is as it has always been, dusty, tired, full of stories, always on the edge of greatness, never quite arriving. You are not disappointed. Disappointment is only possible where hope persists, and here, hope is as common as mud. You turn away from the gardens that do not exist and descend into the streets, ready for another day. Behind you, the terraces catch the sunlight and for a moment almost look alive. But you know better now. In Babylon, the most important things are built not of stone or clay, but of the stories that people tell themselves, stories that endure long after the walls are gone and long after the gardens have faded into legend. You smile as you walk, part of the city, part of its unfinished dreams, knowing that tomorrow someone else will stand where you stood, waiting for a miracle that was never meant to be.